There was a moment, maybe recently, maybe a long time ago, when you decided to explain yourself. You sat someone down or typed out a long message, or waited for the right moment to finally say it all. You told them how you felt. You explained what you needed. You laid it out clearly. And for a second, it felt like something might shift. But nothing shifted. Or maybe things got better for a week. And then slowly, quietly, everything went back to exactly the way it was before. And here's what most people do in that moment. They try again. They explain more. They give more context. They become more patient, more understanding, more available. They tell themselves, maybe if I just say it the right way, they'll finally get it. But here's the truth. Changing how someone treats you has almost nothing to do with what you say to them. It has everything to do with what you do after. This video is about something most self-improvement content never touches. Not motivation, not morning routines, not a list of habits that will fix your life. This is about something quieter and more powerful than all of that. It's about how your behavior, not your words, not your explanations, not your emotional outbursts, is the only thing that actually shifts how people relate to you. By the end of this, I want you to understand one thing that changes everything. Not a trick. Not a manipulation tactic. A fundamental reframe of how relationships actually work. And why almost everything most people try when they feel disrespected or undervalued is completely backwards. There's also one mistake almost everyone makes when they start trying to change the dynamic. And it's the exact mistake that makes things worse instead of better. We'll get to that. But first, let me ask you something. Think about the people in your life who command a certain kind of respect without demanding it. The ones who don't argue when they're disrespected. The ones who don't over-explain themselves. The ones who don't chase when they're being ignored. There's something about them that's hard to name, but you feel it. A kind of stillness, a weight to their presence. What do they have that most people don't? It's not confidence in the abstract sense. It's not luck with the people around them. It's something more specific. It's behavioral clarity. They are very clear. Through their actions, not their words. About what they will and won't accept. And people around them respond to that clarity without being told anything. That's what this is really about. Not power games, not coldness, not punishing people for bad behavior. Just a quiet, consistent alignment between how you see yourself and how you actually move through the world. Here's where most people are stuck, though. And I want you to sit with this for a second. You already know something is off. You can feel it. Maybe someone in your life takes you for granted. Maybe you're always the one giving more, trying more, adjusting more. Maybe you feel like you disappear a little every time you bend yourself to avoid conflict. And you've probably tried to fix it. You've had the conversations. You've been patient. You've maybe even gotten angry and said things you later wished you hadn't. But here's the thing. Every single one of those attempts has one thing in common. They put the power to change the dynamic in someone else's hands. You explained. And then you waited for them to decide whether to care. You expressed hurt, and then you watched to see whether they'd respond. You gave them information, and then you hoped they'd do something with it. And the truth is, some people will. Some people hear you and they genuinely shift. But a lot of the time, they don't. And that's not because they're terrible. It's because behavior doesn't change in response to information. It changes in response to consequences. And most of the time, when we explain ourselves without changing our behavior, the consequence of treating us badly is absolutely nothing. Think about it. If you always answer immediately, the consequence of being ignored is that you still answer immediately. If you always give more than you receive, the consequence of not reciprocating is that you still get everything you were giving before. If you always stay in the room after being treated carelessly, the consequence of that carelessness is that you're still there. You're not a bad person for doing any of this. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're doing what most of us were taught to do. Communicate, be patient, try harder, give more. But here's what most people don't realize. In relationships, your behavior is the loudest statement you'll ever make. Louder than anything you say. Louder than how upset you get. Louder than how clearly you explain your needs. Your behavior sets the actual terms of the relationship, not the conversation you had about it. And this is where it gets interesting. When you start shifting your behavior, not dramatically, not with big announcements, just quietly and consistently, something happens to the people around you. They feel it before they understand it. They can't quite name what changed, but they start adjusting. Not because you told them to, because the old pattern stopped working. Here's exactly what that looks like. The first shift is the hardest, but also the most important. Stop offering more chances than your emotional state can handle. When someone treats you carelessly and you stay close, stay available, stay warm, you're sending a signal that their behavior is acceptable. Not because you said so, because your presence says so. This isn't about walking away at the first sign of imperfection. Relationships are messy. People have bad days. This is about the pattern. The recurring dynamic where someone repeatedly doesn't show up for you and you repeatedly act as though nothing happened. That pattern has a cost. You feel it, even when you pretend you don't. The quiet version of leaving isn't dramatic. It doesn't require a speech. You stop putting yourself in the position of waiting for something that keeps not coming. You stop reaching out first every single time. You stop filling silences that they don't seem bothered by. Not out of anger. Out of self-preservation. And here's what usually happens. Either they notice and adjust, because they actually value you and just needed the wake-up, or they don't notice. And that tells you everything you needed to know about how much weight your presence actually carried for them. Either outcome gives you clarity. And clarity, even when it hurts, is worth more than the comfortable fog of hoping things will change. The second shift is about how much you speak, not because you should be cold or calculated, but because there's a real relationship between how much someone talks and how seriously they're taken. When you react to everything, every frustration gets a response from you. Every slight pulls out an explanation. Every small tension becomes a conversation. You become entirely readable. People stop thinking carefully about what they say around you because they already know what you'll do. You'll address it, clarify it, smooth it over. But when you become more selective, when you let some things pass without comment, when you sit with something before deciding whether it even needs a response, something shifts in how people engage with you. They can't quite predict your reaction. They pay more attention to what they're saying. Your silence isn't awkward. It has weight. This is not about being passive-aggressive. It's not about punishing people with silence. It's about understanding that every word you say is a form of energy, and when you spend that energy carefully, it means more. The third shift is about protecting your inner world. And I want to be careful here, because this one can be misread. Being selective about who you share your emotions with is not the same as being emotionally unavailable. It's not coldness. It's not suppression. It's the recognition that not every person in your life has earned access to your most vulnerable states. When you share everything with everyone in real time, every worry, every doubt, every hurt feeling, you're handing people a map of exactly where you're most fragile. Some people will handle that with care. Others, consciously or not, will use it. They'll unconsciously know which buttons to press, where you'll bend, when you'll cave. Selective emotional sharing isn't about becoming harder. It's about becoming more intentional. You're not hiding. You're choosing. And that choice says something about how you value yourself. If you've been finding this useful, if something here is clicking into place, subscribe. This is exactly the kind of content we put out regularly. Not hype. Not motivation that fades by tomorrow. Just real frameworks for building a calmer, more grounded life. The button is right there. It takes 2 seconds, and you'll actually want what comes next. Now, here's the part most people miss. The fourth shift is about output, about how much you give relative to how much comes back. Most of us have been told that giving more is always the right thing, that generosity is never a mistake. But here's the truth. When you consistently give more than what's being returned, you don't just create imbalance. You remove the space for the other person to show up. They never have to step forward because you've already covered the distance. You make it easy for them to do nothing, and then you quietly resent them for doing exactly what you made it easy to do. Pulling back isn't punishment, it's making room. When you stop overgiving, you create a gap. And what fills that gap, or doesn't, tells you something true about the relationship. The fifth shift is about where your attention goes when things go wrong. Whatever you react to, you reinforce. Every time you get visibly upset at a certain behavior, you teach someone that behavior gets a strong reaction from you. And strong reactions are interesting. They prove something matters. Sometimes people, not even consciously, keep doing the thing that provokes a response because the response itself is a form of engagement. The quietest, most effective response to behavior you don't want in your life is calm, consistent non-participation. Not a lecture. Not an emotional reaction. Just a steady withdrawal of your attention and energy from that dynamic. You don't feed it. You don't explain why you're not feeding it. You just stop. Patterns that don't get rewarded with attention eventually fade. They don't have fuel. You're not the audience anymore. The sixth shift feels almost too simple. Match what you receive. Don't give 10 when you're getting 2. Don't show up fully when the other person is half present. Don't plan everything when they can't even confirm they're coming. This isn't about keeping score. It's about accuracy. When you give the same level of energy that's being directed toward you, you see the relationship as it actually is. Not as you wish it were, not as it used to be. You see it clearly. Sometimes you look at it and realize they are showing up. Maybe not in the way I expected, but they are here. And sometimes you look at it and realize you've been pouring into something that hasn't given anything back for a long time. Either way, you know. And knowing is better than the slow confusion of giving everything and wondering why you feel so empty. The seventh shift is about presence, about availability, about the unspoken story you tell through how quickly and how consistently you respond to people. When you're always immediately available, always ready to drop what you're doing, always there within seconds, you make yourself a constant, and constants are taken for granted, not always with malice, just psychologically. What is always there stops being noticed, introducing some natural space, not as a game, but because you actually have a life and you're living it, changes the texture of your interactions. Your presence becomes something noticeable when it arrives, not just assumed. It's not about making people anxious. It's about having a life that genuinely requires your attention and giving it that attention instead of always managing other people's access to you. Now here's the mistake I promised at the beginning. The one most people make when they start trying to change the dynamic. They try to do it once. Dramatically. They pull back hard for a week, then get anxious and snap back to old patterns. They stay quiet in one conversation, then over-explain in the next 3. They match someone's low energy for a day, then feel guilty and overcorrect. The approach isn't wrong. The problem is consistency. A single behavioral shift means almost nothing. What means something is a direction, a sustained, patient, low-drama direction away from the old patterns and toward something more grounded. People adapt to environments. If you create a consistent environment, one where you're genuinely present but not overextended, genuinely warm but not boundaryless, genuinely engaged but not always immediately available, they start adapting to that. Slowly. Quietly. Without you having to say a word. That's the real shift. Not a single act of pulling back. Not one powerful conversation. A new behavioral baseline held consistently until it just becomes how you operate. Here's what I want you to sit with as we close this out. Everything we covered today, leaving quietly when you're not valued, using silence as weight, protecting your emotional world, matching effort, not reacting to everything, staying present, but not overextended. None of this is about becoming cold. None of this is about becoming strategic or hardened. It's about alignment. It's about the gap that opens between how you see yourself and how your behavior actually represents you. Most of us, deep down, know our own worth. We feel it, but then we act in ways that contradict it. We chase, we over-explain, we overgive. We stay when we should go. And that gap between our internal sense of self and our external behavior is where so much quiet suffering lives. Behavioral clarity isn't about changing other people. It's about closing that gap, acting in a way that actually matches who you know yourself to be. And when you do that consistently, not perfectly, but consistently, something shifts. Not just in how others treat you, in how you feel about yourself every single day. You stop waiting for someone to recognize your value. You stop hoping someone will finally get it. You stop explaining yourself to people who weren't really listening anyway. You just become someone who acts in accordance with their own self-respect. Quietly. Every day. And people feel that. Before they understand it, they feel it. So the question isn't whether to have the conversation. Maybe you still have it. Maybe some things do need to be said. The real question is, what are you going to do after? Because the answer to that question is the only thing that actually changes anything. Start small. Start today. Not with a speech, not with an ultimatum. Just one quiet decision to act in a way that matches how you actually want to be treated. That's where everything begins.